Well, hello, folks. I've got an American government video for you today. The last time that we had an American government video, we had gotten on to page 37, and we were talking about how that English law had an effect on the American law, and that for hundreds of years, even before colonists started coming to the Americas, the common people of England, had been trying to assert their uh, rights against the king. And we read about how that the kings slowly began to develop these groups who would counsel them, but they were made up of the nobles. These were the rich people. These were the people that owned a bunch of land, and it was made up of the clergy. Now, the Church of England was uh, not even developed at this time. This was still the Roman Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church had significant um, authority during those times. This is at the end of the Dark Ages that we're talking about in the early second millennium AD. We talked about how that in 1265 uh, they brought together something called the Parliament, and that Simon de Montfort even brought in uh, elected representatives. But it wasn't till the time of King Edward I, which was from 1872, I'm sorry, 1272 to 1307. So we're talking, 700 years ago here, that they developed truly representative government, and it has come to be known as the Model Parliament, and it was established in 1295. What they did is they took the nobles, the people who had a lot of land and were rich, and they took the clergy, the priests from the church, but they also elected representatives from the common people, representatives from each county. They called them shires, but representatives from each county and from each little town, and they all met together as a parliament, as a body, legislative body. Originally, there were three what they called estates or groups. There were the noblemen in one, the clergy in the other, and the common people in the other. But more and more, they grew together, and the clergy and the noblemen formed an upper house of parliament known as the House of Lords, and the common people formed a lower house of parliament called the House of Commons. And that's the way it is today in England. They have a House of Lords made up of basically rich people, and they have a House of Commons that is elected from common people, just like you and I. But one thing we know, that this parliament that was started 700 years ago, and it's had its ups and downs, and sometimes it's been stronger and sometimes the king's been stronger, but it was the model for the colonists in the Americas when they sat down to write and form their own legislatures in the different colonies, and when they formed the legislature for the United States of America. There are two major things that your book talks about that were leaps ahead for the English people. One of them happened in 1215, and that was the signing of the Magna Carta by King John. The word Magna Carta, it's Latin. It stands for the Great Charter, and it itself was written in Latin. But in that charter, the most important thing is that King John, who was really hated by the people, uh, the the noblemen, the rich people got together and they made him sign this document, the Magna Carta. And there are a few things that were included in that. One is, for the first time, it was written down that a king was not greater than the laws, that the king had to submit to the laws of the land. But another thing it talked about is no taxation without consent or without representation. The king couldn't just levy taxes on people without the people saying, yeah, go ahead and tax us. And really, that's the way it is in the United States today. There was in the Magna Carta the right of habeas corpus. The right of habeas corpus, that's Latin too. It means to present the body. And what it refers to is kings were in the habit of arresting people and putting them in the tower or putting them in the dungeon. And the people would just disappear. No one would know where they went. No one would know why they had been arrested, what the charges were, when they would be brought to trial, anything like that. And this gave the people the right to compel the authorities to present the person before a judge and to tell why it was that they're being held in jail. And we in our country still have this right of habeas corpus. If we get arrested, we have the right to know why we're being arrested, and we have the right to know who's bringing those charges, what the nature of the charges are, and how we can go about getting out of jail. So they just can't put us in jail for no reason and just leave us there. And trial by jury was in the Magna Carta, along with the due process of law. Again, this goes back to, you just can't throw people that you don't like in jail. There's certain things that has to happen. You only arrest someone if you have a reasonable suspicion that they've done it. And then once they get arrested, there are certain legal hoops that the prosecution has to jump through in order to convict someone. And there's a right to a trial and a right to a trial by jury, as we've talked about. All those things were in the Magna Carta, and all of those things found its way into the United States Constitution. Now, years later, which would be in the 1600s, so we're talking 300 years later, King Charles I of England tried to ignore the Magna Carta and those rights and privileges that had been won by the people. And the House of Lords, again, the House of Commons, the common people, forced him to assent to or to agree with something called the Petition of Right. And the Petition of Right was a list of rights that the people had, the common people had. Now, it would take a couple of civil wars before the kings would finally get it, that the common people had rights. But ultimately, in 1689, Parliament approved the English Bill of Rights. And a lot of those bills of rights found their way into the United States Bill of Rights. The fact that no man is above the law is in the Bill of Rights, the English Bill of Rights. No taxation without representation of the people. The people are allowed to redress the king for grievances. That means that if you've got a problem with what's going on, you could tell the king about it. You could tell him how you want things to change, and you could ask him about it. You could present your grievances to the king. That was right there in their Bill of Rights. Um, the right of the people to keep and bear arms was in their Bill of Rights. Uh, to have free elections. By free, it means that you don't have to pay a poll tax, you don't have to pay in order to vote. It's a free election. Uh, that the people's representatives in the House of Commons should have the right to the freedom of speech. Anything that they say while they're assembled in Parliament shouldn't be prosecuted by the king or anyone else. And a restriction on bails and fines. If someone was arrested for littering, you didn't hold them in jail on $1 million fine. That was considered excessive. And all of those things were addressed there in the Bill of Rights. And as you see, this English Bill of Rights found its way into our first 10 amendments to our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. That should be able to help you finish up that Section 1 review and the identify. Pretty easy work, actually. If you have any questions, put them on here. Thanks.